know, I'm probably terrible looking back, but being in here kind of reminds me of that. This is your guest, though. This is Emily Compagno. And thank you for coming out on a beautiful sunny day. We could use a sunny day. It's not as cold as it has been, but it is cold, and I know it's effort for you to come here on a weekend and give us some of your time. Emily has written a very special book. You know that I love books, and I also really love the Little Point Bookshop, and Kelly and all of her family. Thank you so much for hosting us. Thank you. Thank you. I really believe that every community needs an independent bookstore in order to thrive. And if I can do a little thing to like help bring all these people together and like realize how great reading is and books are, then I will do that. But I also get to bring my friends and then have them stay with me, because this is one of my favorite places to live. My husband and I have been here for a few years and never thought I would live on the Jersey Shore. And I said, to hell with the Hamptons. Who needs the Hamptons? The worst. We love the Jersey Shore. So Emily Compagno is here with us for the weekend. And we thought we would just I'm not going to take up all your time talking. I'm just going to interview her about her book just for a little bit, and then you're going to get your book signed and your pictures taken, and then you'll be on your way and on to your Saturday evening. So I actually knew part of this story, but not the full story, and I didn't let her finish it because I wanted to hear it for the first time as well. Tell us about how did you end up in your life being a co-host of Outnumbered and one of my favorite colleagues?
Well, first of all, thank you all for having me so much, and I think I can never adequately state what it's like to have someone like Dana in your corner. And I'm sure having her as your neighbor and friend here in the community, you see what a bright star and a special person she is. So truly, I am here because of Dana for so many reasons, and I know that I am one of countless people who say that. You know, the kind of person where you're like, oh yeah, they're my best friend. You're like, wait a minute, there's like 100 of us that say that. Well, that's how Dana is, and that's how I feel about her. But she's made an indelible impact on my career and my joy and my sense of fulfillment. And definitely this book would not be the book it is if it weren't for her, and certainly today would not have happened. So thank you, Dana, for making this all happen.
You're welcome.
And Little Point Bookshop, I come from such a book-loving family. My mom was a librarian, my sister owned a bookshop, so I am most at home amongst the stacks. And you all coming out to buy this book and to read it, it just means the world to me. Thank you. So the short story, because the long story has a lot of God-directed curves, right? Where you look back and you realize, gosh, that windy road, it all had a sense of purpose. And definitely being here today was the result of a circuitous route, but the whole time in my head, I always had these goals that I was going after. So I went to law school after college, and my goal at the time, I wanted to be an international law attorney, and ended up in the criminal sector. And I'd always been a dancer. Ever since I was 3, always dancing, ballet, I danced it in college, and I'm from Oakland, California, so I'm a big Raiders fan, and I knew in law school, I'm like, oh, I wanted to try out for Raiders. I didn't have enough time in school, and irony is that as a practicing criminal defense attorney, apparently I had enough time to try out for the NFL. So I did, and I made the squad, and at that time, that was sort of when the business model was really starting to become widespread of having not just an anchor on TV, but also a subject matter expert, right? Someone that would be brought in for a topic to explain to others what it meant, or a little in-depth analysis in the span of 2.5 minutes. Oh my gosh, a legal analyst, that could be me. I want to inform and inspire and educate others through the lens of my experience. And so my rookie card at Raiders, it says, what do you want to be when you grow up? Mine said, a legal analyst. And so I knew that I had to have a career first, so that what I said was credible and indeed had the experience to talk about it. So after Raiders, I became a federal attorney and represented the government and worked my way up. And then at a certain point, the short answer is the local station gave me a shot, and I had like a 6-minute segment, I'll never forget, on the Elena Kagan nomination. And after that, then I just sort of wound my up, and then one day my reel made it across a couple Fox desks, and then the rest is history.
Wait, I have to ask, what is it like to be an NFL cheerleader? Greg Gutfeld wants to know.
Who's trying out? I'm a really good coach. It's the best of times. It takes up all your time. It truly took up more time than being an attorney. Every day I was doing something for it, and I would say it's just all consuming, but in the best way possible. And I know that, there might be some assumptions or things about that. It is nothing but supportive. It is nothing but elite and hardworking, and those girls that do that, I mean, they are working 24 hours a day toward representing that team.
Because there's a lot of charity work involved.
Yes. We had a minimum amount of philanthropy that we had to do. We were in the community, and for a team like Raiders, our territory stretched forever. And in fact, ironically, the Broncos girls, for example, don't travel out of state, or they didn't at the time. But we did. So we went to a lot of different states that wanted to have girls come, including all over, like in my book, we went Mexico and Iraq and Kuwait and Japan and China, all over the world. So I think it felt incredible to represent something bigger than myself, but in a way that felt like I had the support of millions inside of me every time. And the acknowledgement and the knowledge that every time we interacted with someone in the community, that I was representing Raiders. That might be the closest they get to the team, only for the rest of their lives. And so I was aware of that responsibility, and I was really honored by that. And it was fun, man.
What was it like, though, to be on a team that everyone hates?
I wouldn't know.
One of the things about Emily is, obviously she works hard. She's on Outnumbered, she's on the Gutfeld Show, she's on America's Newsroom, she's all over. She has a podcast that's incredible, and then we have the book. But the other thing is, I'll see her sometimes, like, around Halloween? And she's getting full, crazy werewolf makeup or something, and she looks at the crowd, I'm like, what are you doing? And she's getting on a city bike, and she's going to the charity event that she does every year. And is that something that you grew up with, like, in terms of the volunteerism that you've carried on, or do you it feels like the charity work that you do for veterans, for the military, for dogs, for the children, I mean, you're kind of unstoppable on that front, and it's very impressive.
Thank you. I feel such a commitment and a responsibility to steward your time wisely. I mean, and I don't have any better explanation other than all I want to do is serve others that serve us, who don't have recognition, who don't have a platform like we have the honor of having. And I think back to my time as a federal attorney, where I was aware, all the time I was aware that you were paying my salary. So I felt very conscious that whatever I did with that, I needed to appropriately steward that. And I feel the same way with my time. I feel the same way with it on air. If I have the honor of you watching me, I better be making the most of it. You better come away and having been educated or entertained or inspired. And I feel that way about these charities and being a voice for the voiceless. And that what I want to do, my primary role is that of a messenger, so that I can message these angels among us who are serving those who have served us in uniform, or the four-legged heroes that can't speak for themselves, with children that just need some funding so that they can be made whole. That's something that I take the most seriously, and I feel at the end of the day that I need more time, because there's always more to do, right?
I always say that I'll buy any minutes that people are selling, so we could do more. Hey, Kate, could you bring me a book? Thank you. It's TikTok Kate, everybody. TikTok Kate. Okay, so let's get to the book. This is called Under His Wings, How Faith on the Front Lines Has Protected American Troops. And this is a part of the Fox Books series, which is a juggernaut in the publishing world. I think that everything that Fox turns its hands to, we are a family that works really well together. We put out excellent products, and this book is so great. I just want to hold up one thing. Hold 1 second. Okay, see how this is? You'll be able to see in your books. All of these badges, all of these medals, all of these things came from Emily's family. Oh, wow. And when I learned that, it's so special. And what I hadn't seen, I love books, we talk about it all the time. But the formatting of this book, the graphics, the way that it came together, it's a beautiful book to have. It's a beautiful book to give away to people. So we thought what we would do today is just talk about 3 particular stories of the many, many, many stories that are in here, and have Emily tell you a little bit about what's in the book, what you can expect, and let's do that next. So let's start with, what era are we starting with?
Well, may I deviate from the plan for a second to talk about this one?
How dare you?
I promise it dovetails in with it, but as Dana kindly pointed out, I mean, I just want you guys to know, my heart is every word in this book I wrote and thought about and labored over, and every point in here, every concept in here, that I just, when you are reading this book, just know that you have a little window into my heart, and so much of this, there's not even captions, but this one, across from my dedication to my parents, it's the cover of Liberty magazine. Do you guys remember that? It was one of the earliest publications here. For 5 cents, you could get the week of July 19th, 1930. And in this particular Liberty magazine, they profiled my great-great-grandmother because she was part of the Gold Star pilgrimage in 1930. This is one of the stories, so I'm taking it my one. And after her son died, after he made the ultimate sacrifice in World War I, this was my great-great-uncle, Joe Lorenz, who was part of Patton's Rainbow Division. He lost a leg first, he went through a leg amputation, and then he died, and he was buried in Suresnes, France, in the American cemetery there. And in 1930, there was a Gold Star pilgrimage that President Coolidge signed into law. And so widows and mothers of the fallen were shipped over on the taxpayers' dime, rightly so that they could see their husbands and their sons where they had fallen. And so I have photographs of my great-great-grandmother standing there at Uncle Joe's grave with her hand on the tombstone, and that was profiled in this Liberty magazine. And so much happened during the making of this book and after it, including I was able to get one of those magazines from July 19th, 1930, and I gave it to my mother as a gift, and it was an incredibly special moment we shared, because we've only, other than that, only seen photographs of the cover and of the spread, and for her to hold that history in her hand, knowing that history flowed through our blood too, it was an incredible moment.
It is. There are some really special stories in this book. Should we talk about the Vietnam era?
Yes.
Okay, let's try that one.
Thank you. So, in here I have the honor of, you'll read that we go through different conflicts, and one story in particular. First of all, you guys, every story, it's like children. You can't pick a favorite, so just know that the highlights we're talking about today are simply because we selected them, but every single story is equal in its impact and in its uniqueness. And some of these stories were never told before. So some of these people who I sat down with told me, I've never said this story out loud before, and I'm trusting you to carry it accurately and adequately, and that too is an honor. And I prayed first and foremost that I did them justice. And included in that is Colonel Tom Moe, and he was an F-4 pilot at the time. And in 1968, those of you who might remember, there was a span of time when the United States munitions that were in these F-4s that flew in pairs, they were exploding on their own. And so in one week period, for example, we lost 13 pilots from our own munitions. And at that point, the pilot stood down, sort of mutiny, and said, you guys have to fix this fuse issue. And the Air Force did. They ground all the pilots, and they assured them, you're back. You're gonna be fine. Everything's fixed. And by the way, this particular mission, I wanna get this right, this was his 85th combat mission. So an F-4 Air Force pilot, 85th mission, and it's the first mission after the Air Force assures these pilots that everything is going to be safe. And the pilots devised a plan because they didn't trust the Air Force. They said, all right, we're gonna fly at different altitudes. We're gonna fly enough apart so that if one of us explodes, the other one won't be taken out too. And they had some altitude considerations that they did to protect themselves. Well, they take off and they're flying their sortie. And at that point, the mission was essentially bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And what happens? His wingman explodes, and his plane explodes. And Colonel Moe, while in an inverted tailspin, had the wherewithal to radio back to base to warn off the other pilots, to tell them it is not safe, it isn't fixed. And in doing so, grounded all the other pilots that were already in air and stopped those that were taxiing to take off, saving all of their lives and earning him not 1, but 2 Silver Stars. So that was one of the Silver Stars he was awarded, was because of that phenomenal maneuver. So after he obviously survives the landing, and he evades capture for 3 days. And on the 3rd day, he's still in radio contact with the Americans, and they're trying to locate him. And he can see where the other pilot, where his parachute went down, so he assumed that he had made it, but he didn't know for sure. And he's in communications with the Americans who are coming to rescue him. This is his 3rd day of hiding in the jungle, and he sees that there's a dense fog everywhere, and he knows that it's going to make rescuing him difficult and maybe impossible. And he's on radio comms with the pilot of the plane that's coming to get him. And he's above the fog, and that plane's partner is above the fog, right? And I don't know how it all works, but they flew in pairs always. So one is high above, and one is the one that's coming down to rescue him. He's directly talking to the pilot, and he says, can you make it? You might not be able to. This fog is here. And the pilot says, I've got you, brother. I'm coming to get you. And then he heard him get hit, and he was shot down. And Colonel Moe knew in that moment that this man had died trying to save him. And he knew and could hear at that moment, truly, the Viet Cong closing in on him. And he destroyed his radio, destroying any hope that the Viet Cong could obtain that classified information and our technology, the basis of the second Silver Star, and also extinguishing all hopes, all chances of him being rescued. And 7 years later, after that man endured torturous captivity, so torturous that honestly I didn't even go into all the detail in this book because it is unnecessarily frightening, but this man endured it all. The physical torture he endured and got through it by his faith and by specific prayers that you'll read about, and had some of the most incredible Christmases that you'll read about. 7 years later, after he thought the country forgot about him, after he lost friends at the hands of the Viet Cong, all the things that had happened to him, he gets rescued, or he gets released, and the first debriefing meeting that he has with the Americans, still on Asiatic soil, first question out of his mouth, what was that pilot's name? Because that's the brotherhood that he represented, and that's the culture of the time, and that's the culture of people who love this country and who serve it and sacrifice so much without fear and without thought of the risks of the ultimate sacrifice. And to this day, by the way, and this is one of the codas that isn't in the book, but that I have a million of for every story, he is fighting to get that pilot's remains brought home so that he can be laid to rest on this soil.
And this book is just filled with these stories. But there's another one, which is, you went to a war zone. Can you tell people about that?
Thank you. So I mentioned earlier that I had been on a USO, or that I had cheered for the Raiders, obviously, but I'd been on a USO tour, and a really, this book has a lot of lightheartedness too. I want you guys to know that. I think as I did during the listening of this and the talking and the writing and the editing, I'm pretty sure that you will cry, but you'll also laugh out loud at points too. So it's not just a Debbie time. But a lot of these guys and women, they went to the USO tours. So the great uncle of mine I mentioned earlier, who made the ultimate sacrifice in World War I, his sister, who we'll talk about in a moment, she deployed for 1.5 years in World War II as an anesthetist nurse in the U.S. Army Nursing Corps. Went to visit him in the graves, went to visit his grave in Suresnes. But she wrote home and talked about, gotta go for now, guys, the USO tour is here. And one of the Vietnam staff sergeants, Daryl Enfinger, talked about how he remembered the USO tour. He remembered the gorgeous ladies, and he's like, I don't even know who else was there. I can tell you Miss America was there. And how much it meant to them to have this break during wartime. And among those threads is my story of doing a USO tour. So as an Oakland Raiderette, I was one of 5 NFL cheerleaders that were selected to go to Iraq and Kuwait. And this was July of 2009. So triple digits heat, by the way, which obviously pales in comparison to what the guys and girls had to go through. But we started in Kuwait. We did nightly performances, meet and greets. We went to hospitals. We visited, command centers. And then when we got to Iraq, we did all of that, and also visited a lot of forward operating bases. And we went everywhere by Black Hawk. It was an exceptional experience. It was incredible to be there in this ambassadorial role for these brave men and women. So many of them I just felt were so young. who were over there, and to have that 360-degree view into what I knew was simply a visual snapshot of combat, of wartime. I knew quite well I did not understand the realities, but I was simply there as a messenger, bringing with me the American goodwill of everyone at home, and also to tell those soldiers and to show them how much we loved them and supported them. And prior to going, I went on a bunch of radio stations and said, guys, send me your letters, send me your cards for these troops. So we came with bags and bags of cards and letters that we would leave everywhere we went. We did not arrive one place without leaving a stack of cards and letters from home. And I loved seeing, after we left the room, like seeing soldiers gathered around reading these cards that meant the world to me. So among those stops was Sadr City, which was a joint security station that, honestly, when we got there, and again, we didn't know up from down. Oh, we're going to Saddam's palace. Oh, we're going to a pool party. You know what? And everyone was like, wait, you're going where? Sadr City? That has to be a mistake. That has to be. No one's going to Sadr City. You girls are not going to Sadr City. And by the way, we weren't there with athletes. I should rephrase that. We were athletes. We were not there with the football players. So it was just us 5 girls, just a group of 5 girls doing all this. And everyone was so shocked, and we were like, why are you guys so shocked? But that is literally the most dangerous place in the whole world. And then we learned that all the guys there too were like, they're not coming here. They've never had a celebrity visit. No, we don't get VIPs. You know, the only visitors we get are unwanted, and we shoot back. Like, this is not the place to go. Very urban, concrete, just middle of nowhere place. But no, we went. So we get in the Black Hawk. We land, never experienced anything before or after like this. We land in the median of like a highway, and then we get out in our cheerleading uniforms, you guys. And we're like, I can't even, looking back, it was so then, and all the guys had run out, or they were, you know, whatever you call it, I don't know. Yeah, thanks, the team, the reception team. Like the reception team, but with their guns, and had stopped traffic in all of their, like, you know, positions. And then we get out of the helicopter and run across the highway in our cheerleading uniforms, and then into safety, like into the gates of this urban concrete, you know, building. We're like, hey y'all. And then they come in after us, you know, and we're like, what's up? So the guys there were like, what is this? But it was awesome. And I remember the lieutenant colonel, then a lieutenant colonel, commander in charge, his name was Tim Karcher. And he was like hilarious, straight out of a movie, tall and imposing, and that's right, and yes ma'am, and you're gonna do this. And so we hung out with all the guys, and you know, I honestly can't even remember if we did a performance or not, but we definitely had our structured meet and greet and everything. And then we got word that, and by the way, it's like smaller than this, or at least the area that we were in. It's quite, you know, picture again, like the middle of a very urban neighborhood in Baghdad.
It was like the worst place.
Yeah, like not a plant or blade of grass in sight. And we're there, and then we get word that our Black Hawk home, or Black Hawk out, had been diverted for a medevac. And I'll never forget Colonel Karcher being like, visibly, you know, I could see that his head explode, and he was like, well, I've got 3 daughters at home, and I am not going to bed until you girls are safely out of here. So we were like, great. And I think at the time, too, we didn't appreciate, frankly, the risk on them that we posed, and the probably massive distraction, and also pulling of resources as we're like, so what's next? And they're probably like, oh my God, we've got to, like, now we have to protect you too. And so we stayed there all night, and we called it the Sadr City Slumber Party. Those guys were probably like, oh. But
I would love to hear one of them tell the story.
Yeah, me too.
And so we never went to bed, and we stayed outside in the courtyard, and it was like summer camp. You know, when you have those nights, or like at your house here, where you just like you sit in a circle and you like bond, and you're best friends with everyone. And we just did that all night with all those guys. I have a picture of it that's in this book, and never went to bed, and we were like family. And I know that it helped the guys forget where they were, and I know that they had a great time, and we just laughed and talked all night with all of them. And then in the wee hours of the morning, and by the way, there's no notice when the Black Hawk comes back, and you can't dilly-dally because obviously it's a precious resource. So it's like, they're here, up and out. So we never got to properly thank them. I barely got to say goodbye. wee hours of the morning, the Black Hawk comes back. Get in. Love you guys! We called ourselves Team C because it was Tiffany, Emily, Ashley, Nina, and Cole. So we were like, Team C World Tour! Love you guys! Bye! And like, blast off. And I learned later, as Colonel Karcher told me, that it was like all the guys could talk about for 3 days. It was like how awesome it was and how fun it was and all the things. And 3 days later, they drove over an IED.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
Timothy Karcher lost his legs and his life many times, by the way. He had to be resuscitated many times. And it was in the middle of a dust storm. And so there was no exfil and there was no helicopter that could get him out. And so the guys had to drive 9 hours to get him out by basically like a bus ambulance, like a ground ambulance. And on the way back, they drove over another IED. And Sergeant Timothy David lost his life. And he was younger than I was. And it was his 6th tour of duty. And after that, we learned about that deadly accident sometime later, and obviously they were in our prayers mightily throughout the entire time. I reunited with Tim Karcher for this book, and it was the most incredible reunion. We have this video of me running into his arms because he was like family that night, and he took care of us. He was our dad when we were so far away from home. And the thing is, what I wanted to tell you guys was that when we reunited and I reached out and I asked him to be a part of this, and I asked if he would tell this story and reunite with me and all the things, he was so incredible. But he said, I would normally decline anything that focused attention on me, but I cannot in this case. He said, the personal connection that we have requires that I help you in any way that I can. And I simply cannot pass up any opportunity to share how God has saved me, both physically and more importantly, spiritually. And I would be honored to help in any way that I can. And you'll read that and so much more about the two of our story and his story, more importantly, in here too.
We're going to tell one more story. I'm going to have her tell it fairly quickly so that we can get you up out of these bleachers, and we'll do. I think she's going to do it section by section so that you're not standing for hours, because obviously you want to get your book signed. But this book would not really be possible if you hadn't had family who had served, and especially women. And you mentioned the nurse anesthetist. Let's hear about her.
Yeah. So I mentioned my great Aunt Lou. So the sister of. I'm not that you guys have to remember so remember guys, my brother, sorry about that. So basically my great Aunt Lou, who was the nurse anesthetist in World War II. So she's in here. Here's what's amazing about her. Number one, by the way, she departed from Jersey. She's sort of a Jersey girl. She was living in Manhattan, but as you'll read,
Aunt Lou, represent.
Yeah, totally. She left from Hoboken on the British ship. It was called the Monarch, and it was in 1944, just before Christmas. And she slipped out of the harbor and then deployed for a year and a half during World War II. So one World War later, after her brother died, and in that same week that her brother lost his leg, her brother-in-law was blown up and in a coma for 30 days. It's all in here. But what's great about her is that she wrote home regularly, and my family saved all of her letters. So we have the most insightful and cheerful glimpse into the war, because for I don't know if it's classified purposes, but essentially she wasn't allowed to really discuss the war ever. So it's all about the color and what daily life was like. And she wrote home so often from everything about, there was this whole sort of war between the American officers and then their allied officers of who would get the nurses' attention. So it's hilarious descriptions of we're going to the party tonight, and the Americans are so jealous, but they had their shot and they blew it, so we don't even care, and I'm powdering my nose. But the realities too of the sobering church attendance, and when she goes to funerals for the fallen of our allies and the like. So a lot of sobering letters for sure. But the funniest thing that I wanted to tell you guys about, as we all talk about the price of eggs. So she talks about how in France, because she was in England, she was in Germany, and she was in France during her deployment. And she talked about that, how soap was so scarce in France that for them they would sell it or give it away so that everyone could have it. But what she really needed, you guys, which was so expensive over there, how funny is this, was gin. So she literally writes home to her mom, Rosa, the one I talked about before. She's all, okay guys, so I'll make a list of some things I want at the end of the letter, but will not mention scotch or rye or rum. Oh, I guess I'll not, Jen. But if you can send me some, it'd be more than welcome. Then she goes in to say how to do it. This is like black market. She's all, soak off the label, Mom, and mark it shampoo with an S, or RM, or RI in the corner. We pay 3 European currencies, 15D, you would know better what that is, that little symbol, for 15 scotches and 10 gins, or about a total of $14, or 60 cents a drink. And she says, that's too much for little me. And I found that hilarious. And she has so many other letters home that you guys will get to enjoy and hear too, that really brings out what a frontline nurse was like, for good and for bad, but for real most importantly.
Emily, you want to? Okay, we'll take 5 quick questions, but she's gonna have to talk fast.
Yeah, I'll be fine.